This is People of the Dream. This is my first long-term podcast with my friend and fellow dreamer, Jake, known to some as Dr. Jakubec. Great to see you, Jake.
Wonderful. Or Darren Jakubec. Great to see you, Bill.
Darren.
Darren is my birth name. Yeah, a lot of Jakes come out, but yes, great to be here. Thanks, Bill. I love this.
Always been Jake. I actually was like, I was curious what your actual title was. You're a GP anesthesiologist, is that right? Anesthetist?
Yeah, it did. The definitions always change, but GP is kind of an old term, general practitioner. Family physician is more current, but family physician, anesthetist, more they really exist in Canada and Australia, more so, less so in the United States. But yeah, family doctor trained, and I practice doing anesthetics, emergency room work. I no longer deliver babies or do family medicine, but it's more in the northern regions of Canada. So you do just more than family medicine. So that's my day job, yes.
I was looking you up and I saw the interview you did on the BC College station. And
oh, wow.
I've been listening to you.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. But
yeah, 6 months ago. What is it called? Metamorphosis. MED Metamorphosis is the name of the podcast if anybody wants to check it out.
I'd forgotten about that. But yes, I hope I sounded okay.
You sounded great. It was great. It's great.
Yeah, it does give a bit more context. I do recall of what my occupation is like and a little bit of how I've woven in dream work, hence this connection.
Do you want to start there? Do you want to start talking about what it's like to be a doctor and working with dreams in the pain clinic, or where do you want to start today?
There's so much, Bill. Sure. Why don't I just give an overview and then we can weave in and out. It's been both extremely rewarding and extremely frustrating at times. I think most people I know, no matter what your field, definitely medicine, you find a part where you're doing what's traditionally done or allopathic or Western medicine, and you see the flaws or how it could be expanded, and you try and pursue those no matter what the field. And with more holistic care, family medicine, emergency medicine, but all fields really, you see a way where it could be expanded or we could do better. And what I roughly call inner work, for lack of a better term, psychological / spiritual / social, and how certainly family medicine and most family doctors or general practitioners or nurse practitioners know and speak about how everything matters to health. And you can only do medicine so long before you see the people fall through the cracks that aren't served by the system or the current system or traditional allopathic medicine. And all sorts of great fields have developed out there. And I have integrated a lot of them, but specifically dreams where I can, to expand people's overall health and my overall enjoyment of practicing medicine. There's my summary.
Your elevator, what do they call that, an elevator clip?
The elevator pitch. Yes.
It's cool. Yeah, one of the things you talked about was like someone who was there in the emergency room with you and you asked him about a dream. It was very cool to see you in the hospital in this role as a doctor, and also just asking people about their dreams and the effect that it had on them and the effect it had on you, which is kind of cool to listen to.
Very much so. It's kind of ride the edge of confidentiality and what can I say, what can I not say, but I do have a small pain clinic. I do with a physiotherapist, which is great. It gets the physical, somatic aspect of health and insists that people address that. But when you hit a roadblock, I'll say, I've got a spiel that I use sometimes, like, okay, sometimes traditional Western medicine doesn't answer all the questions or make sense, and overall health includes nutritional and social and psychological and both medical and genetic and toxins and viruses. Goodness, there's so many things. But what is one of the few things we absolutely have control over is our psychological blur, just barrage people with options of how are they not taking care of themselves or how might their physical symptoms be manifesting. And I'm saying, I'm also a doctor that works with dreams. If you have a dream, sometimes that just shows an insight into where we might be blocked.
That's so cool.
And amazingly, people, like somebody said, the dreams are this backdoor route into the psyche that people don't even recognize. It gets into their soul, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So people will tell you a dream, and by the time they finish telling you the dream, they've realized some block in their life, or it just shifts the paradigm in a way that traditional counseling or traditional mechanisms don't address. And I would argue somewhat similar to the way that psychedelics sometimes address at their best, or
Yeah.
retreats, self-reflective retreats address at their best. But yeah, big topic.
Yeah, especially when you bring in the issue of trauma. It's interesting that you brought that in because I was thinking about Gabor Mate and when you were talking about the health stuff. And he talks a lot about trauma and health conditions and how much of people's health ailments are rooted in their exposure to trauma, which overlaps a lot with what we do. That's like the whole way I think about dreaming nowadays is rooted in my understanding of dissociation and trauma and abuse. And that's sort of the heart of everything that I do is related to that in some way.
Yeah. I've read pretty much all of Gabor Mate's
You
stuff.
have?
Sometimes he's a very brilliant writer. Sometimes I don't he loses me a bit at times, but generally I agree with him. Generally, he's got some absolutely brilliant statements and summary statements, and the gist of what he's saying, I completely agree with. And he's taught me a lot in how do I stay the course and acknowledge the truth of allopathic Western medicine, that
Yeah.
this is actually a nasty virus. This is actually like mycobacterium, or this is actually appendicitis. And at the same time, sometimes it's not. And it's really difficult to stay grounded in Western allopathic medicine when you see just how true it is that so many illnesses have a basis in a deeper trauma, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. I think trauma is a pretty good term. It's a little bit overused nowadays, which I think makes it tricky to use. And people kind of sometimes call everything trauma, which maybe it is. Yeah, it's just interesting. I've started using the word dissociation more just because it like expresses kind of a core way that we separate from ourselves. It's still a pretty clinical word, but I think because people use it a little less, I can talk about it and explain it to people without all the people come to the world of trauma and they think so much about the thing that happened to somebody. They're so focused. Not that that's, I don't mean to be dismissive of that, but there's just not the understanding that's needed of how trauma is part of a bigger cycle, and that the whole point of trauma and dissociation is to actually remove yourself from the pain so you can get to some place where you can actually come back to yourselves. And part of the reason that I think it works so well, that understanding works so well with dreams, is because dreams in a way show us what we've never stopped disassociating from in a way. There's these things from our childhood, our whole culture, like discourages us from going there. And I think it's dreams. It's interesting. Recently, I was reading some of the science about how the part of the brain that's active, they think is actually connected to the part of the nervous system in the brain where those dissociated memories are stored. That was kind of fascinating because the waking mind, there's this like gating process that happens that cuts us off from those feelings, cuts us off sometimes from the memories and experiences. But when dreams are active, the part of the brain where they think those memories and feelings and experiences are stored, actually dreams have access beyond the gate, which I was like, wow, that's kind of, it's in a way, it's a sort of a duh for us because it's like we kind of knew that, but it's always interesting to see a scientist confirm what you already know from working with people's dreams.
And you say behind the gate, I've since working with dreams, I get a vision of a gate or somebody that opens a door in the dream or somebody that's giving the keys in the dream. It's like, are you willing to open the door? There's always something behind the door. I do like the word dissociate. It's a bit of a, sometimes it's a hard word to describe because if you're dissociated, you might not. But at the same time, one of the ways I describe, people will say, well, why would I want to look at my dreams? Or I try not to. I can be like a salesman sometimes to say, you should go there. Very often, unfortunately, but is that they show how we get in our own way. And it's not for me I like saying the world is filled with people telling you what to do or how to live your life, but there's nothing like you telling yourself. And it often manifests in how are you not living the best version of yourself today, or how are you in your own way, or what's holding you back. And the dissociation falls into that. Well, if you're not truly living your best version of yourself, whatever that is for you, you're dissociated on some level. And
Right.
I still like whenever we think dissociated, it reminds me of zombies that show up in dreams that it's like a dissociated person is often one that's not feeling something or not in the moment, be it literally enjoying the dance of a dance, literally not dancing at a dance, whatever that
Yeah.
means for you, sometimes literally, or you're not feeling the sadness or the sorrow of X and Y and moving through it and moving on with life, and how life is just less fulfilling if you're not feeling it and you're dissociated. Or I still love that image from, was it the Jim Carrey version of the Grinch, where he's like looks so surprised and he's feeling his heart. He's like, I'm feeling. It's really overdone, but I love it. It's like suddenly he finds life back through feelings, and it's kind of cliche counseling language, but yeah, dissociated from self, dissociated from feelings is a good way to describe it.
Yeah, I like it. Also, just because it easily leads into the idea of reassociation. Like, it immediately gives you, when you say trauma, it's like, okay, you could heal from trauma, but there's not like an inverse word. Untraumatized doesn't really help. But the idea that you can go from dissociation to reassociation, that there's actually something we're separate from that we can connect with again.
Mhm.
I really like that, because I think part of the reason people don't want to go there is they don't know that there's something bigger. We're taught to live within this confined version of who we are. And if you don't, know that there's something more beyond there, or even if, I've been writing a book, a workbook, and one of the things I've been writing about was how, like, most of my life I've had like a niggle that there's something more. Even since I was little, I had a feeling like it feels like there's something more. But when the whole culture kind of reflects to you, like, no, there's not. The whole idea that there's this inner world, like, that's a very reassociated idea. That's a very, like, kind of expansive idea once you realize, oh, I have this whole life inside of me that could help me to actually be in the world in a different way. Is really a pretty foreign concept in the culture. It's not
But
real.
yet not. It's we haven't. There's often not a language, I find, that fits beyond the more traditional religious language and within spiritual traditions. But one of the things I like to do, if I get a group of people together, I'll say, okay, how many realities are happening right now? Or how many realities are you living right now? And you can get like Matrix like or AI like. You can, I'll say, okay, I'm going to give you the option. Is it like 1, 2, 7, or infinite? And like only a very, very small percentage of people choose one. And it's so
Yep.
it implies that people, they get a sense that there might be another version of how things could be going on, that like this three-dimensional reality is absolutely true, and that if you got an appendicitis, we should probably deal with that, or that if the baby is stuck, the baby, like these things are actually true.
Yeah.
We can't deny them in medicine, but there's another reality that's true from an experiential point of view, at the very least, that we experience it as true. Like if you had trauma in childhood, or you have trouble with a father figure or an abusive person in your life, that you're gonna constantly be hyper vigilant or just on edge, waiting for that in almost every interaction you're in, subconsciously. You don't even know it's true, but you will likely
Right.
live from that place. Like it's a basic counseling psychological truth, but that inner lived reality shows up in dreams. And I tell people my story of just going through the Tim Hortons drive-through to get my morning coffee, and I'd had a dream that I was in like the Roman Colosseum and died, and trying to save two friends, and like a spear went through my chest, and then I went and then I anesthetized like a 3-year-old to get their tonsils out, and I anesthetized a 5-year-old to get their tonsils out, and like trying to just ground myself in my day. It's while I was practicing medicine, I was somewhat living that dream imagery. I was somewhat living those dream feelings. My heart rate was faster that day.
Yeah.
I was still experiencing what I had lived in my dream, which certainly didn't match my childhood in any literal way that I can, like, sure, I had some significant difficulties in my childhood, but I wasn't in the room. Like, however this plays out, that energetically, I'm living this throughout my day. And if you can help that point that out to people, and one of the most recent breakthroughs, other than I'd say organized religions or religious spiritual traditions,
Yeah.
the best single thing we've talked about, the internal family systems, is this relatively newer on the scene that unabashedly has a language around different realities that
Yeah.
people are experiencing and living. That's what I'm kind of fascinated by, the internal family systems, people and movement, that they just say it. look, you're living this whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
There's this, you're living with these different personas within you. And
Yeah. I
for those
love
of us
that.
who work with dreams, we've known this all along. It's like,
Yeah.
it's right there. But finally, there is a therapeutic form that has a language around it that I don't completely agree with all of it, but you'll never completely agree with all of everything. But it's a great modality and start to open the dialogue, I think. For those that, I think organized religions and spiritual traditions are great as well, but they don't always resonate with people and they scare a lot of people away. And there's a lot of luggage for a lot of people, including me, which is part of the reason I'd had to find something else. I'd church hopped and looked for other ways of finding what is bigger out there, or what is inspiring me, or why should I live a certain way, or these big picture questions, existential questions.
Yeah. It's interesting with a couple of things about the internal family systems. Another thing I love about it is the no bad parts. I think
Yeah.
like that it takes the judgment out right away is kind of unusual.
Yes.
And as far as my own relationship to it, I've kind of done a deep dive on it the last few weeks. I actually had a dream about wanting to be a good student. I have several clients that work in that system, and I've thought for 2 years I need to really understand it better and study it more. And I had this dream and I was like, okay, Bill, you need to if you want to be a good student, then do it. And so I've read Richard Schwartz's book, the second edition on the internal family system, and Frank Anderson's book on, I don't remember the title, but it's basically trauma and internal family systems, because trauma is sort of something that fascinates me. And the more I dive into it, actually, I don't like that they sort of impose this model. It kind of goes, so for me as a dream worker, I tend to part of the reason I love dreams is that it gives people space to kind of discover their own parts, if you will. But the more I study it, the more I realize that it's overall, it is a pretty good structure that I actually find myself disagreeing with it less and less. Like the more I know it, the less I disagree with. I don't like the way it's presented sometimes, but I think that's partly because it comes from a clinical background. There has a clinical background, and this work is a little bit more, I don't know what you would call it, but it's not clinical. It's more personal. I think it's more personalized in a way, but
Dream work, you mean? Working with
yeah.
dreams. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, are you okay if I talk a little bit more about this?
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I did a class on this morning on where we just kind of explored IFS in the context of dream work. And the thing they talk about these managers that we have, but in a way, like what I realized for myself at least is that like what they call the manager is really what I think of as the dissociated self. It's like the part of myself that it's actually who I think I am, without like a bigger spiritual understanding of who I am, or a bigger dream understanding of who I am. It's like part of me that like still walks around with anxiety, still walks around not really trusting myself, not really trusting God, not really trusting. It's kind of my inherited, what we used to call in the work persona, this kind of developed. And so that part of it I find really striking. And also the idea that like there's a self that exists. We used to call it the child self, but I like the idea is this adult self. One of the things we were playing around with that I was thinking is just the act of working with your dreams. If you work with it in terms of being in relationship with your dream, not analytically or not interpreting them, but if like breathe into being in relationship with your dream, you're almost automatically stepping out of that dissociated self, the manager self, and you're giving yourself space to witness yourself. You're stepping into this bigger self. And I just feel that's such a radical thing. It is. It's so radical because I think we're normally run by something that we identify as the self. That's a more limited version of who we are. And the more we can step out of that place and kind of witness, so you're looking at a dream, not from that intellectual place, but you're actually like taking a breath. What's it like for me to be with this dream? Or what's it like for me to be in the dream? You're laughing. I'm not sure what you're laughing at.
I'm laughing because like, I understand what you're saying. I'm thinking sometimes when I try to explain dreams to people and what it's like to work with dreams, I lose them because it's like,
am I losing you?
No, I'm laughing because I'm with you, but I think I probably wouldn't say it the way you're saying it because I've lost my audience when I try to tell them people. It's like there reaches a certain point working with dreams. It's like people that work with psychedelics, that at some point you have to do it. Like, you can only talk about it so long until you actually do it. Then it becomes easier to put words to. But I admire you putting words to it, and I try and do the same. I'm smiling because it's sometimes just so hard to put words to, Bill. And I don't disagree with your words, and I understand what you're saying. But man, like, for those people who only work with three-dimensional reality and objectively what they see in the moment, it's really, really hard to have this conversation.
Yeah.
To have so I'm putting myself in your shoes as you were speaking there and thinking, this has been a lot of my challenge in medicine, or to speak to my colleagues. It's like, how do I go to speak to people who have found a lot of truth through psychedelics? I got no problem talking to them. But to
Yeah.
speak to a lot of medical colleagues and surgeons, and I'm getting better at it, but it's been one of my determined journeys, is to find voice around it in a way that it's not too woo woo for people to understand, that I don't lose too many people. But it's hard.
Well, but I think that's part of the challenge, because I think this is where I like the word dissociation, because I think the language itself is kind of dissociated. So it's not like it's just hard for you. It's like, this is what happens in a dissociated culture, is we don't have the language for what we're talking about, because in our culture, what we're talking about doesn't exist. Like, of course, you're going to lose people, because the culture, everything I was brought up with is sort of a negation that there is something else. Like, even my spirit, so I grew up devoutly Catholic, but there was no inner world. There was the church. It wasn't like there was talk about a soul. I had a sign over, a little plaque over my bed that said God is love. But there was no, it was all rote. It was all like, you follow the church's rules, you go to confession, you go to communion, you go to church. There's no such thing as a relationship with God. I'll often talk to people about this story of, like, I was an avid reader, and we had this very small bookshelf in my house, and I read every book in the bookshelf. Most of them were Reader's Digest books. And then I got to the last book which was the Bible, and started reading the Bible. And my mom, God bless her, she was horrified, because what she had been taught is you don't read the Bible. The Bible is something that's, one, you have it in the house, is more like an icon, and you basically like let in the Bible through what you're taught on Sundays, or what you're taught in catechism class at school. But you don't read, one of the things that's been amazing for me about working with, I have several Orthodox Jewish clients right now. It's a pretty big percentage of my practice. Like, one of the things that like completely fascinates me is like the depth of Torah studies that they do, and how much of a personal relationship they have with that. Like, they have a language. Like, they have this whole language for talking about spirit and God and the Bible that is like, I'm like, just blows me away. And a lot of them also know Hebrew, which is a much more complex, rich language, actually. They're often like, oh, we have a word for that in Hebrew. And I'm like, okay, let's hear it. It like makes me want to learn Hebrew, because it's like, there's a language for all of this. And there's a relationship. There's even a relationship to the language. Like, they take apart the words and they study the words and the letters. The word doesn't just have a meaning. It has a context and a history. I mean, that's such a foreign idea for us, for me at least, in the West. Like, what do you mean? It has context and history and meaning, and beyond sort of what like Merriam-Webster tells you it means. Like, you go to English class and you take a test, vocabulary test, and you learn what the word means. End of story. You memorize what the word means, and that's the end of the conversation.
But to count, like, that's fascinating. I love that context. That to counter a little bit of what you said and agree with you at the same time, most of my clients have been Catholic. That I have a private dream work practice I do. It's not quite as busy as yours, but I've dabbled over the years and sometimes been very busy and less busy, but disproportionate number of Catholics or lapsed Catholics. And the imagery and the metaphors they will see in the dreams has often strengthened their faith. I'd say almost universally strengthened their faith. Whether they go back to the church is another issue, or back to the church never back to the church in the same way, it seems. But there's this language that dreams speak that fits. I swear, like, I'm just most familiar with Christian and Buddhist languages and imagery, And people will see, they'll see I share my dreams a lot, and they'll say, "Oh my God, this is right there from the Bible. That's right there from the Bible. That's right there." And the people that work with, or they're more familiar with the Buddhist, "Oh my God, that is so Buddhist, and this is Buddhist, this Buddhist." Like they see it fits those languages. The traditions are there to help with those experiential. I'd say they're sometimes, who am I to say, but they exist to help with the experiential aspect when it does come to you. And a dream can help with that experiential aspect if you're willing, if you're open to it. And then people have a language around it. It's amazing how many people who have that spiritual tradition or those religious traditions have a language, and then they can apply the language to the dream image, and then suddenly they feel it. And it's like, it's amazing how many people get an epiphany, and it's like I hesitate before they say, "Are you allowed to say this?" But they'll have a blind person in the dream, and I'll say, "Well, do you know the part of you that's been blind on some level?" Like, and it's often hard to fit, but it usually is accompanied by an epiphany that fits with a visual epiphany that they were blind and
Yeah.
now they can see.
Yeah.
And if I just ask the question, it's like I don't even know what their epiphany is often. It's often an experiential epiphany. And they'll go on, if like those that are biblical scholars, well, they'll often see little things that were, oh, okay, well, this totally fits in this. It can very much, like your clientele, it can open a lot of doors having a bit of that language as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's true for me also. Like, because I do still have the imagery. I mean, I did still go to church every Sunday, so I have all the stories. Like, even though we weren't supposed to read the Bible, I did go to church. I went to Catholic school through sixth grade. So I often will relate my understanding of dreams back to what I learned. So I think even for myself, who doesn't know the Bible as well as I wish I did, like I wish I had studied the Bible, I see some of these people, like there's this new young politician from Texas that keeps coming up in my TikTok feed, and he's quoting the Bible in the face of some of these Christian nationalists and what's happening in the country. I wish I could do that. I wish I could stand in front of a Christian crowd and quote the Bible in that way. And, he went on Joe Rogan, and, it was interesting. Joe Rogan was asking him, like, well, what is your relationship with things like abortion and homosexuality in the context of the Bible? And he had no problem, talking about the Bible in the context of that stuff, and his own take that, like, the way this country is heading in those departments, in those areas, is like completely oppressive from the perspective of the Bible. But more personally, like, just for me, like the imagery of, like, even the idea of death, not being permanent, for example, which is something we think of in dreams, like that death in a dream can be something metaphorical as opposed to you just die and it's all over. Like the whole idea of Christ being reborn makes it easy for me to be, yeah, I know what that means, like that you could die and be reborn. They talked about that in church every other week. That was a core part of what I was brought up with. Even when you think of even this idea that I'm talking about this deeper self, I think part of the reason it's easy for me to have some language around that, even if I lose people, is because it's not so different than talking about the soul. So you think of what I grew up with around the idea that we're not just our physical bodies, that there's some kind of consciousness that exists within us. It's not just God in heaven, which is what we were taught, but we were taught that we had a soul inside our bodies. We didn't talk about that a lot because I don't think it fit in well with the doctrine I grew up with. But I still had this idea that there is this other part of me that's not a physical part of me, that for me now, and I just think of it when I think of dreams, it's just in terms of consciousness. There's a part of me, a soul part of me that's connected to a bigger consciousness. Whether you call that bigger consciousness God or something else, it's kind of irrelevant to me. That the important part is there's something beyond the physical outer world reality of what I've learned, and that this inner world soul that's connected to a bigger consciousness that we can access through our dreams. I think that's kind of an easy, basic language that if you have some, for me, with that religious background, it's not so hard to go there.
And
so I
for
think
me, with my scientific background, is that, well, that can improve your health as well, profoundly, in ways that are really hard to put to words sometimes.
Yep. Well, I mean, I think if you understand that part of you as being more at peace, for example, and it's not so hard to understand that if my nervous system is like wired and not that's probably not the best for my immune system. I do think there's some simple things that I think people understand that, like, no, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm anxious. Like, I'm more likely to get sick when I'm tired, I'm exhausted, and I'm anxious than when I feel at peace inside myself in some way, when I feel rested. I think it's like you were saying about those people you talk to about the multiple realities. It's hard to maybe get on a deeper level, but it's not so hard to, like, at least begin the conversation. I think most people at this point know that if you're stressed, that's probably not good for your health.
Yeah.
Blood pressure, at least, right? Like, stress equals high blood pressure equals heart attack. Like,
Yeah, we used to call it type A personality and stress, and it's fallen out of the current. It's more medications and blood pressure and cholesterol. Like we talk less about type A personality, even though it's absolutely true. It's non-stress people have heart attacks, but not as many. Like it's but we not as much of it used to be part of the interviewing process. I've been a
wow, that's
practicing medicine
wild.
for 30 years, but it's not as emphasized as part of the practice anymore. So even like this very conversation, even one of the things I like talking to you is how do I take this back and apply it to my medical practice, bring it to the emergency room in a way that is palatable. And for me, even the talk of religion it's always been a radioactive subject. And it's like, oh, I don't belong to a specific church, although I church hop and I believe a lot of the premises and I believe there's so much truth there and it intermingles and fits. A lot of people, the language can be very difficult for them. And to bring that into the emergency room, into the pain clinic, into the
Yeah.
family medicine clinic is a challenge. And dreams are one of those fascinating, everybody dreams like, or at some point in time or once they're open to it. And that pathway for insight is always possible for people, which is why I like it, because I've surprised a lot of people that they will get an epiphany about themselves or how they're in their own way from a dream when they just didn't expect it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting what you said about everybody dreams. I'm a bit of a numbers geek, so I actually did a math thing the other day. I looked up, like, how much of our lives do we dream? And they say conservatively it's over 6 years of our life we spend in the dream state. That's crazy that we dismiss that part of our life, that we spend 6 years of our life in the dream state, and people just kind of dismiss the whole thing. It's kind of a wild idea in a
Yeah.
way. Speaking, you're probably the most prolific dreamer I've ever met. Speaking of, speaking of math stuff, I went back through your file, like we emailed back and forth, and you send me dreams, and I have 21,000 emails for you. So if 20 quarters of those are like you sending me dreams, which I don't think is an exaggeration, and then there's an average of 2 dreams, that's at least 4,000 dreams that you've sent me.
Thanks, Bill.
It's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool, but I think if somebody finds a truth, like, well, don't you want to know more? And I'm just that sort of a person. If I find this procedure works or this injection works in my pain clinic, I want to know more. How can I better make this? I think it's a bit human nature. And I've found truths through dreams. Like, why wouldn't I want to know more? My life has gotten better by learning the lessons of my dreams. And they just keep coming. Maybe I'm a little over the top, but for me,
I
I'm
don't
not.
think you.
I
I
like
don't
it.
think you are. But you're talking to a similar person.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. They certainly changed my life in so many ways for the better. So why would I not?
But what do you think it is about you that makes you more open to that? Because I am sympathetic, because I do think there's like a hard part of the work, right? Like, I remember a story that Sue tells about someone who came to a dream retreat that we did, and they didn't want to work with their dreams. And they were like, I see what you all are doing. Like, there's a box under my bed, and like there's all this unconscious stuff in it, and you're all pulling the box out and opening it up. And I'm like, nah, I don't think I'm going to go there. I'm curious what you think it is about you, because some of it is hard, right? Like, whether it's past life stuff, like you talk about that dream. I was surprised to hear you say that your childhood wasn't so much like that. I mean, I understand you weren't in the Roman Colosseum, but I know how much what your childhood was like. And I would beg to differ. I would say your childhood, parts of your childhood were not so different than being in the Roman Colosseum, you know. So that's hard for people who have to open that kind of
Yeah.
material up in their dreams. Like even you mentioned, I guess even just that dream, like, and I heard you say, like, I walked through my day with that dream and I was like, okay, talk about losing people. I'm like, we just lost 100 people, because who wants to walk through their day
It wasn't
with that?
intentional. I didn't want to walk through my day, but it was energetically there.
But you choose to. Let's be honest. Like, for whatever reason, like, you choose to, or maybe you feel like you can't turn it off, but you
Yeah.
love it. Like, partly because it's not just about that. It like also opens up all these other parts of who you are.
And I've somewhat of an answer for, like, I'm curious about this, and I was talking to my neighbor Patrick and said to him, because we were wondering, he had some serious challenges in his childhood, and I said, oftentimes the people who I find the most somatic diseases, the most fibromyalgias, bless them, the most chronic fatigues, the most are people that will say, I had a good childhood, and like I had a great mom, a great dad. My parents, like they will, as long as they had a roof over their head, some basic food, and they weren't blatantly serially abused, they're like, they say everything was good. And there's like two categories of people almost, and this is a theory I have currently. I'll prove it wrong tomorrow.
Let's hear it.
That those who are willing to acknowledge that some hardship occurred and there was something we might call suffering, something we might call some serious hardship, emotional hardship at the very least, actually occurred. That wow, I went through some serious emotionally difficult times, and they can say that with an honest, heartfelt sincerity. They're willing to open other doors. And I think I'm one of those people. I've worked with people with dreams for a couple of years, multiple sessions, and their dreams will show like hell, literally war,
And
hell,
a lot of
torture.
people have nightmares.
Right. And you'll say, so, and sometimes it's their mother inflicting the hell. It's like, how was your relationship? Oh, mother was great. Everything was just fabulous. And father, like, they're okay, sure. Like, I'll take your word for it. I have a bit of doubt here. But whether it's mother, father, uncle, society, social media, bully, teacher, war, God knows what. But most people, or then you get into the other realm of, sometimes people have so many dreams like mine that whether past lives are actually true or not, you'd swear, like, for God's sakes, this makes zero sense. I got to believe in past lives just because this is so out there that maybe it's true. Maybe we've got things are passed on past lives genetically, ancestrally, who knows? But bottom line is that there's a feeling that things have been hard in the past on some level emotionally. And despite the evidence showing up in people's dreams, they won't admit it to be true. And those people I find are often blocked. There's almost two camps of people in a variation, but that camp of people in particular, they're the kind that put the box under the desk. They're like, no, everything was good. My childhood was good. I have either that, or sometimes they'll say, I have God, I have this, my parents are this, my parents, like, they won't acknowledge that there was any hardship. And if you're not willing to acknowledge that things were hard, it's hard to link what you're experiencing to current day context. And you often, somatic illnesses, so many somatic illnesses I've seen, excuse me, they fit the narrative of, like, for example, I had one person in the pain clinic, and it's like, I just said they had just this crippling pain, and I said, I go through my spiel. It's like, everything in your childhood, everything was good, no trauma in your past. No, it was great. And about 5 years later, the physio I was working with said, has she ever told you what her dad did to her? I'm like, no. You just, and it's not for me to push or go there, but it's like, chances are people don't want to say just how hard life was. And I think maybe one of the things that's different about me is I've always thought life was hard. And it's like, okay, well, if there's a way, if there's a way of getting past that, I'm going to access it. So if dreams are way past it.
Yeah. I think it's hard because a lot of us were brought up with sort of the mentality that that you're an ingrate, basically, if you don't. Or I think there's also like this fear that I'm going to be like a victim. I'm going to be
Yes.
judgmental or be a victim. I think it's hard to separate it for a lot of us from the idea of judgment or victimhood or being an ingrate, etc. Again, and I don't mean to like belabor the word dissociative, but I like to combine it with the word culture, because I think it's like one of the ways that I give people space around it is by talking about it in relationships to the culture. So like the word trauma, for example, people have like here in the States anyway, my associated with trauma was always like rape in the Vietnam War. I grew up where that was sort of my association with the word trauma. So that like use the word trauma in relationship to something that I went through in my childhood, from that perspective feels like kind of honestly feels ridiculous. But the idea that the culture itself is dissociated in some way, i.e. that my parents also didn't get what they needed, because we live in this culture where that's built around people surviving. You think of like how many of our parents are immigrants and how they left everything they had behind. 3 of my 4 grandparents were immigrants. And I mean, I was just thinking about that the other day, what that must have been like for them to leave. One, what must have been happening for them to want to leave. That's sort of a whole like it takes a lot. I imagine myself leaving the US and going to some completely other country where I don't really know anybody. I'm like, that's a radical thing. And then you get here with the conditions that these weren't wealthy immigrants. They were all poor Irish, German, French immigrants. They had nothing when they got here.
Yeah.
And what that must have been like. And so the culture, their whole life gets revolved around just managing and surviving that. You don't have the luxury of being traumatized. You know what I mean? From that perspective, you don't have the luxury of going to therapy. You don't have the luxury of looking at dreams. You don't have the right to complain about it. Because if I spend time complaining about it, that's time that I'm not like focused on getting through my day.
Yeah, I agree. And so if I've been given the privilege of enough peacetime, enough affluence to be able to reflect and to become a better parent to my kids, or to become a better husband, to become a better person, why wouldn't I do that? Like, I guess we all have choices, freedoms. You can do whatever you want, but I have time and space to have this freedom. I'm having dreams. So in my experience, we never say I am in Canada. We didn't say where I was practicing, but
Actually, we didn't.
so so many podcasts I see, it's from an American perspective. It's like, it's not all United States perspective. I'm in Northern Canada in the West here.
Cheers to our Canadian
Cheers.
friends.
Yeah, we're international, Bill. But yeah, my grandparents were the same. It's immigrants from, goodness, I think, I don't even know. Like one side was German, but
because they left it all behind, right? Like how much of your family history did you get from your grandparents?
zero.
Yeah,
Like
likewise.
they died early, and somebody passed me a book, I think, it was within Russian borders, but Ukrainian speaking, running away from God knows Russian-Ukraine war, from like who knows? I'm just guessing as much as anything, and border boundaries and disputes, and I don't even know. But
Yeah, there's the dissociation though, right there. I don't think it's just because, I mean, my grandparents all died young too. My last grandparent died, I think, when I was around 2. So I didn't know any of them except as a baby. My dad's father, I have no memory, of course. But I think it's part of the dissociation that they didn't tell my dad and my mom all those stories, which then would have been passed down to me, whether they died young or not. Like, I grew up in this Catholic world that everything was about family. And yet, how weird is it that I know almost nothing about my grandparents? God forbid, great grandparents, like, forget it. That's a pretty, without getting into personal hardship, that's a pretty wild level of dissociation right there. And that's pretty wild when you think about it. Like, I think historically although I think European history is full of that kind of migration and war and people fleeing, so it's maybe not so abnormal. But I think in an easier world, that's not the way it would be. Like, I think your kids are going to talk about you and Beth, you know what I mean? Like, if and when they have kids, they're going to pass on stories about dad and mom. It's not going to be your grandkids are going to know you in some way.
It's true. It's how they talk about neglect is often unreported abuse, because neglect is an absence. Like people have no idea what wasn't passed on, or people will have dreams or raising our kids without much support at all. What wasn't there? People are often not aware of what wasn't there. Well,
You
support.
said that about it. I made that as a note for the podcast. You said like one of the things that's interesting to check out about a dream is like what's not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And people they just have no idea because it didn't occur to them to have an idea. To have a grandmother around to help with the children, like, what? That didn't exist in our family. So, but other people, if they have that, it's an obvious thing, like you say. But it'll come up in dreams. I often say it's not 100% true. Nothing's 100% true about dreams. So one of the most difficult dreams to work with is one where you're alone. And just pointing that out to people and the circumstances around it. It's like, did you have to face this alone is often a great question. And no bad parts thing. I love that's one of the things. Like, just don't see it as bad. Just see it as learning. It's like, did you have to do this alone? And that's another reason people can't see that things have been difficult. What's the ideal world where you have supportive community and people are hugged and you face hardship or adversity in a healthy way and you're supported. I don't know. I'm just making this up and what seems to be ideal on a lot of levels,
I
right?
don't think it's a wild idea. I don't think it's a completely crazy idea that we would be held and loved and cared for.
Radical, Bill. Radical.
Unfortunately, I do think it's kind of radical within our culture.
Funny yet not. But how it is to talk to people or talk to people that work with dreams that people can't fathom what they didn't have a lot of the time.
That's the problem. Again, there's not a language for it. So even like you said the word neglect, like I think, you can only think of it as neglectful if you understand that there could be something, number of 10 more. When people don't want to judge, and then people feel like if you say, well, I was neglected, it's a way of saying that being judgmental of your parents. And if you're attached to your family, your parents, that can be a really hard obstacle for people to, if they're still in their lives, if they're still a part of their support system, if you were taught, that you don't speak bad of your family. That was kind of in the culture that I grew up with, is like, you didn't.
But even in a therapist's office or even people will hold that their parents, that they had difficulty on any level and that their parent, like they perceive it as they don't want to criticize their parents. It's like, I'm not asking you to criticize. Were things difficult for you? And even that's just indirectly criticize. They see it as criticize, and there's a door they're not willing to open. It's like, things don't have to be bad. It's your experience of things.
Yeah. One of the things, if people have kids, you can sometimes ask, like, well, what would it be like? Would you raise your kids that way? And they're like, they don't know what to say because they're like, no, of course I wouldn't. But that's sort of like, it's hard. It's hard to, like, I think, again, there's not a language for, you can talk about what you didn't have and you can talk about what your parents didn't have. And you can talk about what I didn't have as a parent. So of course my parents didn't have what they needed. They didn't give me everything that I needed because they didn't have what they needed. And that's not a judgment. That's, again, it's just part of the culture. Like, we're not taught that my parents weren't taught that kids needed the kind of attention that we're talking about. I don't think hugs was part of my parents' parental training. They were taught to get them to school, you get them to church every Sunday. You raise them to be good Catholics. You teach them that you're supposed to be a good Catholic and have more Catholic babies. You teach them to follow the laws of the church and not sin. That's legit. A lot of that's good stuff. But there was no conversation about hugs. There was no conversation about love. Even it wasn't love your mother and father. It was honor your mother and father.
Right.
You think of that alone, it's like, honor your mother and father? What are they like? Are we in the military now? Like, what does that mean? I'm supposed to salute them? That's an interesting language. It wasn't even love your mother and father. It was honor your mother. That's crazy when you think about it from a kid's perspective. Like, honor them? I mean, of course, honor may have this whole other meaning and other respect them, respect what they went through, is different, I think. And maybe honor carries that meaning in some other way. But
so dreams have offered for me, in what we're talking about, support and a feeling of support in my heart, a feeling of support that's given me confidence to speak to you, confidence to do another emergency room shift. It can be hard. It's like, oh, okay, another shift, another this, another. You never know what you're going to face.
What's an example of that for you?
I just think of a dream example. There's a couple
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, what's a
dreams.
dream? Because
There's one of them. I remember
we've
I'm
talked
walking
about
through.
your spear through the heart dream.
Yeah. As the opposite of that. Like there's one I'm wandering through the woods and I find a little like rocky knoll, maybe 100 feet up, and I'm kind of looking down and I see other people in the trees walking. And a woman comes up to me and puts a blanket around my shoulders. And I remember sketching this. And
Wow.
you had asked me, so what's the feeling? So sometimes one of the best dream questions is, what's the feeling? And is that familiar? And I said the word was comfort. And you said, is that familiar? And I said, no. Like I'd never, what was I, give or take 45 at the time? Like
Yeah.
when I had that dream, I don't remember comfort
Yeah.
from my childhood. Like it's hard to live if what I remember is more energetically feeling like Roman Colosseum,
Yeah.
that feeling of comfort. And then I've had various dreams. I love music of different musicians singing,
You've had a
and
series of them lately.
I've had a series lately, one where I'm just going towards an orchestra down in the basement. Like I'm just full, like my heart is just pulling me to different musicians throughout history have pull. I had a dream where there's four guys on stage with these massive speakers and they're playing, and I'm kind of in the background, and the music stops, and one of them says, "So you coming?" It's like it invites me
Like
in.
coming into the back room with them?
Right. No, coming in to play with the band. So they're all playing instruments. So it's like, am I coming? Like, are you gonna play? Are you gonna? It's the opposite of standing in the background. And I've since been trying to learn violin with variable success, but I'm trying to join a band here and there, but more the metaphor of can I feel connected? Can I feel part of
Part of the
something
band.
bigger?
Part of the band. Band of,
Right.
yeah.
Feel connected in the world, which fits, on a feeling or energetic level, it fits spiritual language more. It's like feel part of something, feel
Yeah.
connected.
There it goes again.
There what
Yeah.
goes.
Yeah, no, it's cool to have that like reference point in dreams. I think one of the things they can do is give us like offer us possibilities beyond the language that we know, beyond the experience that we know.
Yes.
I had a dream recently that I've been with a lot, which I'm with a group, like sort of a squad, not a music band. We've all got guns. We're in some kind of gun battle. You might think of, a lot of people might think of that as a trauma dream or something, but the actual energy in the dream of like being in the fight in that way and having a feeling of a squad at my back is not something like you and I were talking the other day about the lack of mentors and the lack of male mentors in the world. There weren't mentors in this dream, but at least they were like brothers. I lost my brother when I was 17, two other brothers, but I wasn't as close to them. And so, like, to have this feeling in a dream, to be part of a band of brothers, to be part of a squad. I'm not even sure they were all men, actually. I think there might have been a couple of women. There were like 6 to 8 of us. But there's this real sense of family or squad or military unit, like we all had each other's back. Like nobody was leaving anybody behind. We were like dealing with whatever this battle was we were involved in. Not a person that's just, super a gun person. So that's also kind of radical for me to like feel comfortable in that place, to feel like a healthy sense of power. It's interesting, it's a whole kind of experience that like it's outside of my experience. I think I feel that with you to some extent. I have a few other friends that I feel that with, I'm like close with. I think a lot of people don't. It can be radical to like feel into a dream like that. You mean there could be a place or a way of being in the world where I'm not by myself, where I have a way to fight back and I have people at my back.
Powerful feeling.
It is a powerful feeling. I
It's
like
hard,
it.
it's hard to go forward in the world if you don't feel like someone's got your back. The Christian tradition has a language around that. Like there's people who have
Where two or
blank.
more gather in my name.
Yeah. Or but if you actually feel it, in your, like you talk to any body worker or somatic worker, and it's like people that feel things, and it's just another route to get into how do you feel things, is using the somatic route, be it physio massage or craniosacral or the number of other things. How do you feel that your back is covered and you can go forward in this world? And dreams can help, and all sorts of other modalities can help. And all of these, like having this conversation, I still bring up, I'm just like to bring back, how do I help this in my medical practice? How do it's helped me? How do I help other people? And the province I'm working in, the government has touted team-based care, and we all agree with it, but they haven't funded it in a way that, like, it's not
Yep.
manifesting in a way. But if we would actually work as teams, we could help people's overall health so much better. And we all individually know that, especially people outside of the hospital or the practitioners outside of the hospital, but it's not manifesting. So it's like, even to try and ground this discussion back in my reality of working with the people I see and are trying to help in my pain clinic, my emergency room, or anesthetics or whatever. Because I find these discussions can go off the rails in a way that's fun for you and I, but it's hard to make it applicable to those who I'm trying to convince do some form of inner work and it will help your health.
Yep. Integration matters, man. It's has to go beyond just talking about it. If you can't bring it into your life, then it's a hobby. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I don't think it's a hobby for us. It's like,
Yeah, that's true. Well, Bill, I think I'm ideaed out for the moment.
I could go on all day, but I'm
I could
also feeling like winding down. I was just about to ask you the same. Are you ready to wind down? Because this feels like,
Yeah, I'm ready to wind down. I could also go on all day, but I think, yeah, there's only so much my mind can take in at any one given time.
I think for me, because I've been writing this book, my mind's like, I need like an outlet for it. So this is great. Thank you. As always, it's great to be with you. I appreciate you a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bill. It's been a privilege. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thanks to everybody out there listening. Like and subscribe if you want to help out here, make a comment. And until next time, say goodbye. Bye, Jake. Bye, everybody.
Bye.